So on the leadership aspect, and I'm beginning to see this with a lot of people, but I think for her, it's clear that there are certain things that she is confident in and that she likes. With, at least from what I know, are two things. She's gotten excited about things that relate to environmental science, and she gets excited about things that that relate to the real world and that she can construct. And I think that she needs to take control over the climate in her classroom by inserting more of the things that you're naturally good at. You need to provide opportunities. She needs to provide those opportunities for herself in the classroom. And so whether that means pushing herself to make her lessons more real world connected, because obviously those are things that she implements very, very well and is excited by, or finding a way to commingle the things that she feels deeply invested in with the content that she's teaching. Because I think she has more control over that than she thinks.
I think she probably does, and I think the entry point for that is her vision. If she is saying, you know what, my classroom is going to be a classroom where I have these kinds of activities that go on. I have these kinds of ways that I engage with the content in a rigorous way where my kids are seeing real world application. I have these kinds of lessons where my kids, if she really crystallizes that in her vision first and then starts driving towards it, on a unit and a daily level, I think that then will change sort of how she operates. And
to be honest, I think that is something that should be in everybody's academic part of the real world vision, because if we're really looking at the level of rigor that secondary mathematics needs to be taught, there needs to be real world application, honestly.
Yeah.
So I think, I agree.
So what change will we want to see for her then, and by when?
The change itself that I would want to see is more real world application, more lessons that are centered around real world applications, where she's actually taking the content and making a real world connection for students. By when? I think this is an interesting question, just because I would have to either figure out when I would either get back in there to see it, or see a lesson plan where it is planned in there, or student work where it's you know what I mean? I would need to see either. I don't think it has to be something physical, but I think it would either have to be I physically am seeing the lesson, or for example, maybe it's a performance task, or maybe it's a project, or maybe something where kids have to connect the content she's teaching with real world application, or a lesson plan.
Do you think, I agree with you. I think you need to have some evidence that this is happening. And I do think either seeing student work or having seen a videotaped of her implementing a lesson that's aligned to this, or seeing a lesson plan that she created that's aligned to her giving more of this real world application stuff. I have two questions for you though. So given that she's a person who you wanted to be PK this week and you wanted to have a finalized transformative vision this week, do you think this is going to get her to that, or is there something else that needs to happen, concretely for her? Or are those not the right things for her right now? And again, I think all of this is on the table towards, right now, she's a orange person for the kind of core member that you want to be creating. She's not where you want her to be. However, we've identified some things that we think could be an entry point for her. And so I want to make sure that we're thinking, we're balancing both okay, this is the reality of the kind of core member that you want to create. This is the reality of where she currently is. Let's see what the path to bridging the gap between the two looks like. What were the things that you were thinking was going to be happening for her to get her PK and to get her to have a transformational vision this week? What were those things that were supposed to be happening so that she would be there by the end of this week?
I had to meet with her. That was why I put her right there. I think, if I'm thinking sequentially, I think the first thing that I would need to address with her out of everything we just talked about is being clear about what she wants out of her classroom and making sure that it's the proper thing for her girls. and really establishing some numerical goals for herself. And then I think if we can come away with that, then we can enter into the conversation of what she needs to do to make that happen. Because I really think in her classroom, the culture that she wants is closely intertwined to what she's bringing to the table, which is closely intertwined to the fact that she is not enjoying her experience right now. You know what I mean? As a teacher, she's not enjoying it. So I think if we can be clear about, I really want my classroom to look like this, holistically and academically, and identify straight up like what would then need to happen, and then make the commitment of, well, okay, if that's what needs to happen, then we'll talk about how we're gonna get that done and by when, and what's gonna be like the artifact that's gonna, show us.
And so for us, we think the thing that's really sparking her leadership is like giving her the permission, or like helping her to feel empowered or have the ownership to like actually make her classroom to be the kind of classroom that she really is excited about.
Yeah, I think it's control. And I just had this conversation with Serrano.
Like she needs to see where her control is.
Well, I just had the similar conversation with Serrano on Saturday, because he was like, he said, Andy, I thought about you this past weekend because every time I talk to you, you keep asking me about the Male Leadership Academy. And he was like, and it finally clicked for me a couple of days ago that like, that's what I get. I can use that academy to like do other things that I want to do with these children and with the boys in particular, but like that's where I get excited. And I was like, yeah, that's the point. Like, if you think about it, we always talk about people being teachers being student-centered, but I honestly feel like you have to be a little selfish in the sense that you have to be teacher-centered before you can be student-centered. If you're not happy in the room, you have to address why that is and find yourself as a teacher first. And I think for Ivory, she has more control over that than she thinks. And I think it's just a conversation of like, okay, true enough, you may not be in a subject area that you like, but there are things that you do well or that you like to do, and how can you bring that in so that work is not laborious? It's like you're using your talents in this space.
And I think these are the things that have to be articulated to her in the conversation. I think to help you now, like, because I think here's the thing, the skill that you and I are working on is, okay, once I know what to do with the core memory, once I sort of have a plan of like, these are the things I want to do with the core memory, how do I extrapolate that out for like all of my cohorts? So now I have individual plans for everybody, and how do I manage towards that in a way that allows me to have very clear priorities each week and allows me to like, benchmark my progress towards my overall vision each week. I think that's the skill that you and I are working on building in your practice. And so, like, to zoom out from Ivory for just a second, right now I think we know the thing that we want to focus in on with her about. Like, right now, we actually feel like her entry point is probably her vision, clarifying, what do you want it to look like in your classroom, specifically around this, like, incorporating real-world application stuff. And, like, for her, you really actually do think that if you help her to see that her vision and her, like, implementation of her own vision is the thing that gives her the control that she really wants and, like, is the lever for turning her on and, like, getting her, excited and passionate or whatnot. Like, that's the thing that's going to put her on a mission and on fire and all that good stuff. Great. I think what you need to know then for your ability to manage her is what is the specific levels of change that I'm going to see. So, like, I'm going to see by the end of this week, if I'm going to have a conversation with Ivory this week, what's going to happen in that conversation? After that conversation, what's going to happen? What's going to happen in the next 2-week period after that conversation? I think here are some thoughts that are floating in my head. So